Hello, my name is Kinsley. You know, on the day I was supposed to feel most loved, my sister stole the microphone at my wedding and announced her own engagement. I stood there in my own white dress while my mother told me not to make a scene. But that was just the beginning. Behind the flowers and fake smiles was a man scheming to drain my sister's life savings. A man our family welcomed with open arms. So I started digging. What I found. It didn't just change my sister's life, it changed everything. What would you do if your family asked you to be quiet, just so they could protect the wrong person? The afternoon light slanted through the high windows of the event hall, soft and golden, the kind of glow photographers chase for weeks. White roses lined the aisles, their perfume thick enough to taste. I smoothed the silk of my dress with my palms, not because it needed it, but because my nerves did. This was supposed to be my day, my wedding. The one I'd planned down to the last ribbon, believing for once that my life might be about me. Guests were taking their seats, murmuring, the low hum of polite conversation rising and falling like a tide. My groom stood at the far end of the room talking to one of his cousins. He smiled when he caught my eye, and for a moment my heart steadied. Then the doors at the back swung open and Valora entered, late, of course, but in a way that made it seem deliberate, as if the room had been waiting for her all along. She wore a cream-colored dress that could have passed for bridal if you squinted. People turned their heads like flowers to sunlight. She moved between them, kissing cheeks, whispering something into our mother's ear that made Delphine laugh too loud. I watched her as I'd watched her my whole life, commanding, polished, always sure the world would bend toward her. The music shifted, the band starting the soft intro for our first dance. The MC stepped to the microphone, ready to call us to the floor. I took a breath, smoothed my dress again, prepared myself for that moment, the first one in years where I might be center stage. And then Valora took the mic. She didn't ask. She didn't even glance at me. One second, she was whispering to our mother. The next, she was on the platform, smiling at the crowd like a queen surveying her court. "Hi, everyone," she said, voice bright and clear. "I know this is unexpected, but I just can't wait another second to share our news." There was a collective intake of breath. I froze. My groom turned his head toward her, brow furrowed. "I'm engaged," Valora announced, turning toward the door where Gideon strode in, smirking like a man arriving at his own party. He slipped an arm around her waist, pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, and opened it with a flourish. The rings sparkled under the lights like a magic trick. Guests gasped, then applauded. Someone shouted, "Congratulations!" I took a step forward, my mouth dry. "Valora," I said, my voice carrying more tremor than I wanted. "Can't you at least wait? This is my wedding." She looked at me the way you might look at a child tugging on your sleeve during a speech. "It's a celebration of love," she said lightly. "Why not double it?" Before I could respond, our mother's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't make a scene, Kinsley. You've always been too sensitive." Sensitive. The word hit me like a slap. Gideon's smirk widened. Even my groom looked down at his hands, as if he could will himself invisible. People surged toward Valora, surrounding her, congratulating, hugging, snapping photos. A guest reached for a glass of champagne from the tray and handed it toward me without looking. It was meant for her. I stood there holding it, the bubbles dying in the glass, feeling like a prop at my own wedding. I sat down at the edge of the room, trying to steady my breathing. On the projection screen above the stage, a slideshow of photos cycled through, but my name was missing from the welcome graphic. Instead, it showed Valora's smiling face with Gideon at some charity gala. The crowd laughed at something she said into the mic. No one looked at me. I set the untouched champagne on the table, rose, and walked out into the courtyard. The air was cooler out there, the scent of magnolia drifting in from the street. The murmur of the party dimmed behind the glass doors. I pressed my palms to the stone railing, trying to keep my shoulders from shaking. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just who we were. She the sun, me the shadow. Maybe if I stayed calm, the evening would right itself. That's what I told myself. The door opened behind me. Footsteps clicked on the flagstones. Valora's perfume reached me before her voice. Gideon followed, his hand still at the small of her back. "You'll always have your memories," Valora said with a half smile. "Let me have this moment." Her words settled between us like ash. I looked at her, then at Gideon, and felt something inside me. Not break exactly, but shift. "Let me have this moment," she'd said, but it had never been just her moment, had it? That line rolled around my head as the sun came up over Charleston, pale light leaking through my blinds like an uninvited guest. My apartment still smelled of perfume and wilted roses from the wedding gifts piled on the table. The dress I'd worn was draped over a chair, a faint smudge of lipstick on the hem where someone had brushed past me without looking. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a minute, feeling the stiffness in my neck. My phone buzzed again. Overnight, photos had started circulating. My own wedding, splashed across social feeds, but in the best shots, I was a shadow behind my sister. Valora, glowing, arm linked with Gideon. Valora, laughing into the microphone. Valora, her dress catching the light. Comment after comment beneath the pictures, "She's stunning." Such a power couple. Someone even wrote, "double wedding vibes," as if I were an afterthought at my own ceremony. I padded into the kitchen, made coffee on autopilot. The clink of the spoon in the mug was louder than it should have been. I scrolled through the images one by one, my thumb pausing over a video where Valora's cream-colored dress shimmered like a bridal gown. In that moment, I realized even the fabric had been chosen to pull focus. Not a coincidence. Never a coincidence with her. The gifts waited like unopened promises. I started tearing paper, not because I cared about what was inside, but because I needed to do something with my hands. China from Aunt Lydia. A monogrammed cutting board from a college friend, an envelope with a check. Then I found a flat package tucked under a pile. It was from my mother's mailing list, sent back to me accidentally by an old aunt. I opened it. Inside was an invitation, printed heavy cream cardstock, gold script. "Please join us in a celebration of family love and new beginnings, hosted by the Bennett family." That was it. No mention of me as the bride. No name, no date, nothing that marked the event as mine. Just family love and new beginnings. My stomach turned. Twist S9. I set the invitation down on the counter and stared at it. A noise from the street below, a delivery truck, a man laughing, floated up, grounding me. I thought back to all the other times I'd been set aside. Valora's solo in the Christmas play. I'd had a better audition, but ended up backstage holding her script. Her piano recital. I turned pages for her sheet music. Her graduation speech. I graduated a year early with honors, but no speech, no spotlight. The truth sat there, unvarnished. I'd been the second act in my own life. I sipped my coffee, lukewarm now, and opened more photos on my phone. The images of Valora at my wedding scrolled past like a reel of someone else's event. Twist S10 came to life on the screen. A cousin had commented under one shot. I thought it was a dual bridal theme at first. Valora's dress, full length, ivory, off-shoulder lace, diamond brooch, left no doubt. She had dressed like a bride to my wedding. I leaned back against the counter and let the anger flare, hot and clean. No self-pity, not anymore. Anger like this could be used. I opened the voice recorder on my phone and started to speak, my own voice low and steady. If I don't matter in the spotlight, I'll matter in the shadow. But I swear I will matter. I hesitated, thumb hovering over save, then deleted it. But the words echoed anyway. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Delphine, our mother. Her tone was sugar when I answered. "How are you feeling, dear?" I swallowed, kept my voice even. "I'm tired. Hurt, honestly." That was supposed to be my day. "It's not always about you, Kinsley." The pause on the line stretched. My heart thudded. Then who has it ever been about? Her words still rang in my ears long after I hung up the phone. "It's not always about you, Kinsley." Then who had it ever been about? That question chased me through the quiet of my apartment as twilight deepened outside. The soft orange of the streetlights began to glow, catching the edges of the still-wrapped wedding gifts stacked against the wall. I couldn't just sit there. My fingers itched to do something, to clear space, to see what remained of my day when all the noise of them had passed. I set my coffee cup in the sink, rolled up the sleeves of my sweater, and began to clean. I started with the framed photo of my parents that I had propped on the gift table at the reception, the one token of my father's presence I'd allowed myself. As I lifted it from the box, a faint irregularity caught my thumb, a small bump beneath the backboard. At first I thought it was a scrap of paper, but the way it was wedged in felt deliberate. I carried the frame to the kitchen counter, careful, like I was handling a fragile heirloom. With slow, steady fingers, I loosened the clips at the back and eased the photo out. Behind the cardboard was a single folded sheet of yellowed stationery, edges worn soft from time. My heart gave a strange lurch. On the front, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, it said, "To my daughter Kinsley, if I'm not there on your wedding day." I didn't sit down. I couldn't. I unfolded it standing at the counter, my breath caught. "My Kinsley," it began. The ink slightly faded, but the loops of his letters still strong. "If you are reading this, I'm not there. But I need you to know something. You were never meant to be a shadow. This day is yours. Don't let anyone make you feel small, not even family, especially not family." I had held everything in since the wedding, through the announcement, through my mother's cold words, through the photos online. Reading his letter cracked me open. Tears came hot and fast, blurring the page. I pressed the paper to my chest, shut my eyes. It wasn't self-pity. It was recognition. My father had seen me, even if no one else had. For a long moment, I let myself lean against the counter, breathing through it, listening to the quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, a car passing outside, my own heartbeat slowing. I smoothed the letter out and read it again, slower this time, absorbing each line. His belief in me stood in such stark contrast to my mother's constant dismissiveness that it almost felt like another world. When I finally moved, I put the letter in a clean envelope and set it by my bed. Then, restless, I picked up my phone. A notification blinked. My cousin had uploaded an album from the wedding. Without thinking, I tapped it open and began to scroll. There were dozens of images, Valora and Gideon smiling at guests, our mother arranging flowers, me blurred in the background like a staff member. Then one photo made me stop. It wasn't from the wedding ceremony itself, but from the rehearsal dinner, a small, private event. In the background, behind a cluster of guests, Gideon stood holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize, her hair dark, head tilted toward him in an intimacy you couldn't fake. I pinched the screen, zooming in. My stomach tightened. That was no casual touch. And that photo shouldn't have existed. No one outside family had been at the rehearsal. I backed out of the album, opened another from a different cousin. More images, more clues. Gideon on the edge of frames, leaning close to women I didn't know. Nothing overt, but once you started looking, the pattern was there. I opened a private notes app and typed a title without even thinking. Track, Gideon. Beneath it, I began to jot details. Dates, times, names of people I could ask quietly. My fingers moved faster as my thoughts sharpened. It wasn't about catching him out of spite, it was about seeing clearly. I put the phone down and went to the window. The street below was emptying, restaurant lights flickering on for the dinner crowd. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, eyes red but steady. I thought of my father's words again, soft but firm. Don't let anyone make you feel small. I whispered into the room, not for anyone else to hear. Dad, I think something's wrong. I didn't sleep after whispering my father's name. The apartment stayed dark except for the glow of my phone, face down on the nightstand. My mind circled the images of Gideon with that unknown woman and my father's letter sitting like a heartbeat in the next room. I lay there until the city outside thinned to its after-midnight hush. At 1:37 a.m., my phone buzzed, not the polite ping of email or social media, but a harsh vibration that startled me upright. Unknown number. No subject, just a link and a message. He's not who he says he is. Watch this. I hesitated. My pulse raced. But curiosity and dread are cousins. They hold hands. I tapped the link. The video was short, grainy, filmed from across a street. Gideon stood under a hotel awning, his shoulders squared, his voice raised, though the audio caught only fragments. The woman with him, maybe mid-30s, hair dark and pulled back, jabbed a finger at his chest. Her voice cut through. "You stole from me! You said I'd be taken care of!" A car passed between the camera and them, and then the clip ended. 10 seconds. Enough to feel like a punch. Twist S5, landing at 2 a.m. I watched it again, and again. Paused on her face, tried to zoom, but the resolution broke into pixels. My hands trembled slightly. Who had sent this to me? How had they found my number? I opened a browser, ran a reverse image search on her blurry face. Nothing. I tried LinkedIn, sifting through Gideon's known business contacts. Dozens of names. One caught my eye. Nora Vale. The surname matched a comment I'd seen under an old article about Gideon's company. I clicked through her profile. Financial consultant, dormant for 3 years. No new posts. But there was a photo from 2018 of her at a gala. With Gideon. The sun had started to gray the window edges by the time I drafted an email. Anonymous, no signature. You don't know me. But I think we've both been lied to by the same man. I almost didn't send it. Then I thought of my father's line. Don't let anyone make you feel small. I hit send. By noon, a reply came. I know who you are. Meet me. Cafe Moira, corner of Meeting and George, 5 p.m. No greeting, no name. Just that. All afternoon I moved like someone underwater. Shower, coffee, sorting gifts. None of it touched me. At 4:30, I put on a simple navy dress, tied my hair back, slipped the letter from my father into my bag like a talisman. Outside, the late summer heat pressed close as I walked the 10 blocks downtown. Cafe Moira sat in an old brick building, ceiling fans turning slow. The smell of espresso and cinnamon wrapped around me as I stepped in. A woman at a back table looked up when the door opened. Late 30s, hair dark, posture reserved, but eyes sharp. Nora. She stood as I approached, extended a hand. Her grip was cool, deliberate. We sat. A waitress poured coffee without asking. I thought I'd never hear from anyone about him again, Nora said quietly. Her voice had a steadiness that felt earned, not natural. But then I saw your wedding photos online. I blinked. You know about the wedding? Everyone in his orbit does. He thrives on spectacle. She slid a folder from her bag, kept her hand on it a moment before letting go. I was engaged to Gideon 4 years ago, signed over financial management rights to help our future. 2 months after the wedding, he disappeared. I lost everything. I felt my stomach tighten. He married you? She shook her head. Engaged. We had a ceremony planned like yours. He staged it, then vanished with accounts emptied. My credit wrecked. I thought it was just me. We talked for over an hour. She showed me emails, court documents, bank transfers. The same business entity, the same style of manipulation. My own name appeared in one contract draft, apparently pulled from a public filing. I stared at the papers, horrified. It wasn't a mistake. It was a method. He's grooming your sister, Nora said flatly, and by extension, your family's assets. I pressed my fingers to my temples. The cafe's soft music and clink of cups felt far away. 2 women, 1 pattern. My father's letter burned against my palm inside my bag. When we finally stood, Nora looked at me as though measuring how much I could carry. I'm not telling you this to scare you, she said. I'm telling you because you still have a chance to stop him. I stepped out into the late daylight, the sky turning gold over Charleston's rooftops. The street smelled of bread from a nearby bakery, a sound of a saxophone somewhere down the block. I walked toward my apartment, slower than I meant to, the folder heavy in my bag. At the corner, my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. New message. You've started pulling the thread. Keep going, or let her fall too. I stared at it, the weight of choice settling over me. That wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. I meant it. That was my line in the sand. The words echoed through me long after I'd said them, still ringing the next morning like the fading toll of a church bell. They lived in my chest as I lay there awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling while pale morning light leaked through the blinds. Sleep had been a fragile, shallow thing, broken by images of Nora's trembling voice, the grainy video clip replaying in my mind, and that last chilling text message. I wasn't looking for drama. I wasn't staging some crusade for spectacle. But Valora, sweet, stubborn, hopeful Valora, was walking headfirst into the jaws of a man who had built his life on deception. And worse, my family, my mother especially, was laying out the red carpet for him. Gideon wasn't just winning her trust, he was being welcomed into our home, our fortune, our name. By mid-morning, I'd brewed coffee strong enough to bite, and I dialed Esme. She was the only one I trusted with this. Esme wasn't a childhood best friend bound to me by sentiment. She was sharper than that. Steady, unsentimental, an auditor at a regional accounting firm. Esme didn't just sense foul play. She documented it. She built cases with paper and ink, not whispers and gut feelings. She arrived just before noon, carrying her laptop bag over one shoulder and a slim folder under her arm. We set up at my kitchen table, sunlight slanting across the worn wood surface like a spotlight. I handed her everything I'd gathered. Nora's bank documents, the screenshots from wedding videos where Gideon's mask had slipped, even the LLC name Nora had given me. Esme dove in without hesitation, her focus unshakable. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, eyes flicking between my papers and her search results. Time stretched, my pulse thudded with every keystroke. Then, after nearly an hour, she stopped. "Got something," she said. Her voice was clipped, factual. She turned the laptop toward me. Valora signed over access to her Roth IRA and her high-yield savings account last week. Both accounts now list Gideon as co-manager. Limited partnership structure. My throat tightened. The same entity from Nora's paperwork? Esme's mouth curved in a grim line. Exactly the same. Same registered agent. Same operating address in Savannah. The only difference is the date. Twist S6. The paper trail was no longer theory. It was present, tangible, and dangerously close. I sat there for a moment, staring at the glowing screen as the truth settled over me like ice water. Then I moved, printing every single page, emails, filings, transfers, account forms. If I was going to confront my mother, I wanted the truth laid out where she couldn't deny it. Not words, not suspicion, facts. The family estate was unchanged, a monument to appearances. White shutters gleamed against painted brick. The wraparound porch stretched wide, its rocking chairs perfectly aligned as though waiting for a magazine shoot. The camellias were in bloom, bright pink petals opening as though the world hadn't cracked beneath my feet. My mother waited in the sunroom, the space arranged like an illustration in Southern living. Pastel throw pillows, sheer curtains, a tea set placed just so. Everything around her was designed to soothe, to calm, to convince anyone sitting there that all was well. "Would you like iced tea?" she asked, her tone clipped but genteel, already reaching for the pitcher as though routine could erase disruption. "I'd like you to look at something." I set the folder on the table between us. My voice was steady, firm. "Please read it before you say anything." She didn't pour the tea. She didn't sigh or frown. She simply opened the folder and began to skim. Her eyes moved across the highlighted lines, her fingers brushing the corner of each page. Her expression never wavered. After a long minute, her lips pressed together, the way they always did when someone in town wore open-toe shoes after Labor Day. "I recognize these names," she said at last, her voice calm. "That LLC came up during our estate planning." "That's not estate planning, Mom." My words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't back down. "That's the same shell company Gideon used to drain Nora Vale's accounts. He disappeared after he gutted her savings. And Valora just signed over the keys to everything." Delphine flipped another page, her eyes still scanning but her expression unreadable. I waited, heat rising in my chest. Finally, she set the folder down and met my gaze. "Every great man is misunderstood, Kinsley," she said softly, almost indulgently. He's building something real. You wouldn't understand the pressures men like Gideon face. I froze, the air between us turning brittle. He's not building anything. He's stealing. This isn't pressure, Mom. It's predation. She tilted her head, studying me like a child throwing a tantrum. Valora will have a strong husband. That's worth more than your paranoia. Twist S7. I had expected denial. I had even braced for anger. But what she gave me was worse. She wasn't defending him with logic. She was defending him with appearances. She was protecting the image of the family, not the truth that might save her daughter. I leaned forward, my voice low but fierce. So you'd rather see her married off to a fraud than admit I'm right? Her tone sharpened, no longer soft. You were always too loud, Kinsley. Too much. You never knew how to support someone without making yourself the center of attention. Let Valora shine. It wasn't a knife. My mother didn't use knives. She used acid, dripped slowly, carefully, burning not with one strike, but with steady corrosion. I stood. I didn't shake. I didn't shout. I simply gathered the folder, slid it back into my bag, and slung it over my shoulder. There was nothing left to argue. At the door, I paused. Not out of weakness, not because I craved her approval. I paused because I was finished letting this family pretend silence was a virtue. If anything happens to her, I said, my voice even, my back still to her, it won't be because I stayed silent. I left without waiting for her reply. I didn't wait long after I sent that text to Nora. The words weren't impulsive, they were measured. Calculated. I'd crossed a threshold, and I knew there was no going back. That night, I couldn't sleep. My body lay still in bed, but my mind was moving, working through conversations, scenarios, facts. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was planning clarity. By morning, the Charleston sky was low and gray, a drizzle streaking the windows. I sipped black coffee at the kitchen island when Esme walked in, already tapping her phone. She didn't need to knock. We'd gotten past formalities months ago. She placed a slim manila folder on the counter. You're not going to like this, she said, but her voice was steady, almost clinical. Tell me anyway, I said. A friend from law school now works for a firm that handles private estate revisions. Apparently, your mom came in last week. She was finalizing the transfer of the family's Edisto Beach property into a new trust. Valora's name is now on the deed. Also, she's moving half of her savings into a joint account labeled Marital Protection Planning. My chest tightened, but I kept my hands from trembling. Who's listed as the financial advisor? Esme slid a sheet toward me. Take a wild guess. There it was, Gideon's signature, clean and smug at the bottom of the form. Twist S14. I stood up, grabbed my keys. Where are you going? Esme asked. Home, I said flatly. They're throwing Valora's bridal shower this afternoon. I think it's time I joined the party. The rain had turned into a slow, misting fog by the time I pulled into the driveway. The house looked unchanged, calm, curated. A few guests' cars were already parked out front. I walked through the side entrance, bypassing the formal foyer. The dining room was dressed to impress. White hydrangeas, embroidered napkins, champagne flutes lined the buffet. My mother, Delphine, stood near the fireplace, directing a young assistant on where to place the candles. She looked up when she saw me, a flicker of surprise followed by something colder. Kinsley, she said with a too-bright smile. We weren't expecting you. No, I said, pulling the documents from my bag. I'm sure you weren't. I laid the pages on the table in front of her, sliding the top sheet toward her with a fingertip. I know about the transfer. I know about the accounts, and I know Gideon's name is all over it. She didn't even blink. She scanned the paperwork, then folded it and handed it back to me. You wouldn't understand. He's helping secure her future. I laughed, quiet and humorless. Secure it for whom? Her voice stayed even, polite. You never did grasp how families protect each other. We do what's necessary. You call giving away our family's history to a man you've known for 6 months necessary? She waved a hand like she was swatting a mosquito. It's not like you ever wanted to be part of the family business, Kinsley. You chose your own path. Before I could reply, a woman stepped into the room. One of Valora's friends, judging by her tailored linen dress. She held a wrapped gift and smiled when she saw me. "Oh, that memory album on the table is stunning," she said. "Valora outdid herself. Your mom must have cried." The words hit harder than I expected. I turned toward the gift table and froze. Sitting on a stand in the center was the photo album I had spent 6 weeks compiling. I'd sourced vintage photos, scanned letters, hand-wrote captions. It was a labor of love for my mother's birthday, but I had waited to give it to her at the wedding reception. It was now labeled, in gilded ink, "From Valora, to the woman who taught me everything." Twist S11. I picked it up, flipping through pages. My handwriting was still there, carefully tucked beneath printed overlays. No credit, no mention of me. I placed it back with deliberate calm and turned toward the room. A few guests had gathered, watching. My mother stood near the fireplace, arms folded. Valora hadn't arrived yet. "It's one thing to ignore me," I said, not raising my voice. "But it's another to erase me." Silence fell. No gasps. No one rushed to defend me. Just polite, awkward stillness. Delphine didn't speak. A woman near the bar turned and began pouring another drink. I walked out, the mist from earlier now turning into light rain. I got into my car, started the engine, and sat there with my hands on the wheel. That night, I texted Nora. "I'm in. I'm ready to do more than talk." I wasn't bluffing. I had receipts. And I was ready to use every single one of them. The following morning, Charleston seemed to wear the early light like a disguise, the kind a guilty party might don before showing up in public. Fog drifted low across the sidewalks, heavy and misleading. The kind of fog that made familiar streets feel like strangers. The live oaks that lined the avenue hunched beneath the haze, as though they, too, were keeping secrets. Esme and I met at Cafe Aurelia just before 9. The place was still half asleep, its tables scattered with the usual morning crowd, laptop clickers nursing their lattes, a mother bribing her restless toddler with a slice of banana bread, 2 retirees discussing last night's ball game as though it carried the weight of politics. The air smelled faintly of espresso and cinnamon, but underneath it all was the sharper tang of nerves. Esme pushed a folder across the table toward me. Her hand didn't shake, but her eyes flickered, sharp with both triumph and warning. "My contact at Southern Bank sent this over late last night," she said. "Took some finagling." I drew the folder closer, fingers brushing the edge like it might burn me. When I opened it, the first page hit me like a body blow, a newly established account. Valora's name printed neatly as primary. Gideon's carefully typed beneath, listed as financial advisor and authorized co-manager. Twist S13. My eyes scanned further. Numbers, columns, deposits. The sum at the bottom made my throat tighten. "There's more than $200,000 in it," Esme said, her voice steady, almost clinical. She didn't bother lowering her tone. "And most of it came straight from the Bennett Family Trust. Quiet wire transfers, spread over the last 4 weeks. Just under reporting thresholds." I closed my eyes for a second, letting the figure sink in. 200,000. Gone. Moved under the careful cover of his polished charm. "So she handed him everything," I murmured. "Or your mother did," Esme countered. "Or both. Doesn't really matter, does it? Either way, it's the same scheme, same model he used with Nora. Different names, different cities, but the same playbook. He doesn't even bother reinventing it anymore." I turned toward the cafe's fogged window, watching the vague outlines of pedestrians blur by. When I finally spoke, my voice was quieter but sharper, like steel under fabric. "I need to prepare 2 files, one labeled proof, the other, choice." Esme leaned back, studying me. "So you're actually doing this? Too late to backpedal now." By the time I got back to my apartment, the morning had already turned to a damp, gray afternoon. I climbed the stairs, my mind spinning through strategies, only to find a thin envelope waiting for me against my front door. Certified mail. My stomach clenched before I even touched it. I knew exactly what it was. I slid it open with a practiced hand. The letter inside was all smooth legal phrasing, cordial ink that bled menace between the lines, cease and desist, twist S15. Dear Ms. Bennett, it began, polite as poison. It has come to our attention that you have made several unsubstantiated accusations against our client, Mr. Gideon Mercer. These statements constitute defamation and, if continued, will result in legal action. The last paragraph was the cruelest cut. Let's not ruin Valora's moment over a misunderstanding. I folded the letter with precision, as though it deserved respect it hadn't earned. Then I slipped it into a folder of my own making and smiled without warmth. He thought he was sending a warning. He had no idea he'd just confirmed everything. He still believed I played by the rules of image and silence. That evening, I met Nora and a journalist friend of hers, Eli, at a neutral co-working space downtown. The building was glass and steel, all modern polish, but we picked a side office with a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like static in a tense room. The walls were transparent, but the mood inside was opaque with determination. Nora spread out her papers across the table, her hands trembling only slightly as she laid down her timeline. Dates, transactions, accounts that had vanished. Eli filled in context with his own notes. Other cases, other victims. The pattern repeating under different aliases. A man who kept changing his name but never his hunger. When I added my stack, screenshots, text messages, photographs, Esme's bank documents, the table looked less like a meeting and more like a war map. Eli sat back, eyes sharp behind his glasses. This isn't just scandal, he said. His tone was grave, but there was a flicker of excitement too, the thrill of a story bigger than anyone expected. This is fraud, repeat, systemic, intimate. He isn't careless. He's calculated. I leaned back, arms folded. Welcome to my sister's engagement. By the time I got home, the night was pressing against the windows, the city outside muted into shadows and sodium glow. It was after 10. My apartment felt colder than it should have. The manila folders sat on the table like silent sentinels, proof and choice. One meant confrontation, the other meant liberation. Both meant war. I didn't sleep much. I didn't need to. The decision was already alive inside me, sparking hotter with every breath. The next day, I called a family dinner. I framed it as an attempt to clear the air. That phrase always worked with Delphine. My mother loved clarity, as long as it was on her terms. I arrived early at the house, as I had planned. The dining room looked like something out of a Southern living spread, gleaming silver, polished to perfection, placemats monogrammed with curled initials, handwritten place cards in cursive so obedient it almost bowed. The performance of family harmony laid out like theater. I placed the two folders on the table, one at my mother's seat, one in front of Valora, each sealed, each intentional. When they arrived, they came together. Gideon's hand rested at the small of Valora's back, his favorite gesture, equal parts possession and performance. He guided her forward like she was something to display rather than someone to love. Valora smiled faintly, the same tired smile she had worn for weeks now. Her face was pale beneath her makeup, her eyes carrying shadows that no concealer could erase. My mother's gaze cut across the room, sharp as ever. She took in the folders, then me, and her mouth tightened. She didn't bother disguising her judgment. So what's all this really about, Kinsley? I looked past her, straight at Gideon. The mask of his charm was still in place, but there was a flicker at the edges, a tightening around his jaw. You sent the wrong woman a threat, I said. My voice was steady, deliberate, final. Now I'm sending you the truth. The silence that swallowed the room when I spoke wasn't the dignified kind that follows respect. It was jagged, suffocating, the sort of silence that presses down on the walls and makes the air itself feel like it might shatter if anyone dared breathe too loudly. Delphine froze, her fingers still resting on the edge of her wineglass, as though any sudden movement might draw the wrong kind of attention. The muscles in her neck tightened, betraying the tension she so carefully tried to hide behind her poised exterior. Valora, seated just across the table, blinked twice in quick succession, her lips curling into that ambiguous little smile she wore whenever she was caught between two extremes, like she couldn't decide whether to laugh at the absurdity of it all or cry at the raw ache suddenly pulling at the seams of her chest. And then there was Gideon. Gideon didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He didn't shift in his chair or let the moment rattle him. He just looked at me with the same practiced calm he had cultivated all his life, the polished mask of a man who believed himself untouchable. To him, my words were no more threatening than a leaf drifting across his perfectly manicured path. I tapped the folder in front of me with one finger. The label was simple, handwritten, proof. The sound of my nail against the thick paper echoed louder than it should have in that tight, breathless space. "Before dessert," I said evenly, my voice steady though my heart hammered against my ribs, "I want us all to hear something. No accusations, no interruptions. Just listen." At the far end of the table, Esme stirred. She had remained quiet all evening, her gaze lowered, her body coiled like a spring that didn't yet know if it would be released in fury or fear. When I spoke, she finally raised her head and met my eyes. There was a flicker there, courage or perhaps relief. She nodded once, a small, decisive motion, then reached into her purse. The glint of her phone's screen was the only light that seemed to move in that still room. She pressed play. The recording filled the air with its imperfections, grainy, muffled, but unmistakably damning. It was taken late one night in a bar where Gideon often held his so-called business meetings. The background hummed with laughter, the dull clink of glassware, the easy sounds of indulgence. And then came Gideon's voice, smooth, self-assured, drenched in that same charm that had always disarmed people before they thought to question him. "She's soft, already moved the money. I just have to survive the wedding photos and the rest is mine." His words hung in the room like smoke that refused to dissipate. The recording ended. Silence returned, heavier now, thick with something unspoken but undeniable. Valora's spoon slipped from her hand, clattering against the edge of her dessert plate with a sound that jolted through the quiet like a gunshot. Her eyes darted toward Gideon, then to our mother, and finally back to me. Her face was a battlefield, disbelief colliding with horror, loyalty tearing against the first sting of betrayal. Delphine's lips parted, but for once words did not immediately pour out. She was always so quick, so certain, her tongue sharp and ready. But in that moment, hesitation cracked her composure. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, a whisper almost too fragile to reach the others. "This is taken out of context." I turned toward her slowly, every ounce of my patience stretched thin. My voice was low, steady, deliberate. "There is no context that makes that okay." Gideon moved at last, shifting in his chair with the controlled ease of a man determined to appear unshaken. He rose, brushing invisible wrinkles from his suit jacket, adjusting the cufflinks that glittered beneath the chandelier's light. His tone was calm, almost indulgent, as though he were soothing a group of children who had mistaken thunder for danger. "I was drunk," he said smoothly. "People say all kinds of stupid things after too many drinks. That's all this is. A joke overheard and twisted. You're really going to ruin an engagement over a joke?" Valora remained frozen for a moment, her hands trembling slightly, as though her body already knew the truth her mind was resisting. Then, with slow deliberation, she reached for the ring on her left hand. Her fingers twisted at once, then again, each motion sharp, strained, as though the metal burned against her skin. When she finally spoke, her voice was brittle at first, but it gathered strength with every word. "I want to believe you," she whispered, her eyes never leaving Gideon's face. "I want to believe that this is nothing, but you forgot something." His expression tightened. "What's that?" Valora stepped forward, her movements graceful but heavy with finality. She slid the ring from her finger and placed it on the polished wood of the dining table. The sound it made, soft, almost delicate, landed harder than any slap could have. "You forgot that she's not the one you should have underestimated." She didn't scream. She didn't break down. She didn't throw accusations across the room. Instead, she lifted her purse, squared her shoulders, and turned toward the door. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor. Gideon reached after her immediately, his calm faltering at last. "Valora, wait. Please, just wait." But she didn't wait. She didn't even look back. She walked straight out, her spine straight, her silence more damning than anything she could have said aloud. The front door closed behind her with a quiet click, but it echoed in my chest like thunder. Delphine remained seated, her face carved into something unreadable. For the first time in my life, she had no clever retort, no polished dismissal, no shield of words to protect her from the truth sitting bare before her. I stayed still too, my hands resting lightly on the table. The air vibrated with the aftershock of revelation, static crackling between the guests who had witnessed the fall of an illusion they had all, in their own ways, been complicit in maintaining. A few murmured awkwardly, their voices thin and brittle. Others shifted, rising from their chairs as though escape might soften the sting of what had just unfolded. The dessert plates remained untouched. Esme leaned closer to me, her voice low but steady. "Think he's going to come after you legally now?" I reached for my water glass, lifted it, and took a measured sip. The cool liquid steadied me, cleared the lingering tremor from my throat. I set the glass down with deliberate calm and allowed a faint, humorless smile to curve my lips. "Let him try," I said. My voice carried easily, cutting through the whispers that filled the room. I didn't just protect her. I prepared for him. And in that moment, I knew the game Gideon thought he was playing had just shifted. He had always bet on silence. He had always counted on appearances outweighing integrity. But this time, the truth had been amplified until it drowned out his lies. And for once, he was the one left scrambling in the wake of it. But even I wasn't ready for what came next. 3 weeks slipped by like fog through the trees. Quiet, slow, persistent. Charleston moved on as it always does. Tourists returned, weddings bloomed across manicured gardens, and my mother's phone line stayed as busy as ever. But in our corner of the world, everything felt still. Gideon had vanished. No more posts, no more dinners, no more morning coffees delivered to Valora's front steps. Nora called one morning with a clipped update. A formal investigation had opened. Financial fraud, probable identity misrepresentation, pending subpoenas. He wouldn't be back. Not to us, not to Charleston. Valora went silent on social media. No captions, no filters. The last photo on her page was a blurry shot from a family brunch. Me, just barely visible in the background. The ring hadn't reappeared. In fact, no one knew where it ended up. I hoped she dropped it in the sea. Or the trash. I spent that time keeping my hands busy, packing, calling moving companies, updating my resume. A boutique event firm in Asheville had an opening for someone with grace under pressure and discretion during emotional moments. I figured I could teach a masterclass on both. The day before I left, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw my mother's name, but something in me said yes. We met for lunch. Her idea. The same white tablecloth place she always liked. Linen napkins, glassware that sang when touched. I wore a navy blouse. She wore pearls. The conversation started with weather, as if Charleston's humidity could mask 3 decades of imbalance. Then, just before dessert, she set down her fork and said, "I was wrong to trust image over instinct." I didn't respond. Not with words. I just nodded, because sometimes acknowledgement is all you'll get, and if you're lucky, it's enough. That evening, Valora stopped by unannounced. She didn't come in. We stood in the driveway like neighbors talking about the trash pickup. I handed her a manila envelope. "Everything's in there," I said. "The notes, the emails, the court documents. I thought you should have them." She looked at me, then at the envelope. "Why'd you keep fighting for me?" she asked. I didn't even think. Because no one ever fought for me, and I refused to keep that cycle going. She blinked fast but didn't cry. We hugged, awkward, brief, and then she got back in her car and drove away. I watched the taillights until they disappeared. Moving day came with gray skies and quiet movers. I left behind the framed diploma no one ever hung, the pink sweater she once borrowed and never returned, and the teacups my mother gave me but never really meant to. Asheville was green and slow and good. My new place had wide windows and floors that creaked. I unpacked the photo of my dad and reframed the letter he'd written me. the one I'd found tucked behind a wedding photo. I hung it over my desk. Next to it, on the wall, I stuck a small yellow post-it that simply read, "Don't let anyone make you feel small. Dad." That note stayed, even when others fell off. Weeks later, Valora visited. Just once. We walked in silence through a park near my place. She wore a sweatshirt, no makeup, no rings. She broke the silence first. "I don't expect things to be how they were." I smiled. "Good, because this time, I know who I am without you." And I did. I didn't get the apology I wanted, but I got the justice we both needed. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who sat beside you at the dinner table, who hugged you in public but cut you in silence. This story wasn't just about a wedding gone wrong. It was about finding your voice when everyone around you insists you stay quiet. So let me ask you, have you ever been told to keep the peace while someone else destroyed your boundaries? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life revenge stories just like this one. Your voice matters here.